best way to lead your daily life so meditation is better is, if you are initiated, to think of the Master. Give credit or discredit to the Master for everything that happens. It's not necessary always to praise the Master. It's sometimes necessary to say, Master, what happened to you? How could you allow this? Still remember the Master. It's not always necessary that we should say Master is always kind. Sometimes he doesn't look so kind. Some of our experiences make us react. Master, are you still there? How could this happen? How could this accident happen to me? Where were you at this time? You're still remembering the Master. Or you can say, thank you, Master, for I found a parking spot. Thank you, Master, for the good thing that happened today. And when something not so good happened, thank you, Master, it could have been worse, and I can see what could have been worse. You really saved me from a worse situation. Any of these steps we take helps you in meditation in the morning. Just think of the beloved Master, and automatically your meditation will improve. So make your daily events as part of your meditation. Think of the Master, repeat the words, walking, talking, doing things where you can, where you need some intellectual attention, put your attention there and then go back to that. There was a guy named Aladdin. Some of you might have heard his story, because Aladdin found a little bottle containing a genie. And when he rubbed that lamp or bottle or something, a genie appeared out of it. Huge, big genie. Aladdin was frightened. But the genie said, Master, I am your slave. You are my master because you opened me out from this prison house. Aladdin couldn't understand how such a big genie could be his slave. He said, if you are my slave, go and do this work for me. Go and build a house for me. And genie went and built the house within a few seconds and came back. Yes, master, what next? And Aladdin said, go and put a bridge on the river. He made a bridge on the river and came back in a few minutes. Every order, every command, this little Aladdin would give to the genie carried out so quickly. Ultimately, he couldn't think of any more commands. Then the genie began to give him commands. Now come on, follow me, I'll show you what I can do. The slave became the master. The genie took the Aladdin all around and made him do things that the slave wanted, the genie wanted. And one of Aladdin's friends came to him and he said, you are such a happy-go-lucky fellow. What's happened to you? You are so sad and depressed. He says, I am sad and depressed because I found a genie. He claimed to be my slave and I have run out of commands. And now the genie is taking me all around and I have become his slave. How can I be happy? He says, I'll tell you a way. When genie talks to you, what is your command? Masters say, bring a pole, a wooden pole from the forest and dig it into my room, the middle. So when the genie brings the pole, digs it, and he says, Master, what's your next command? My command is, go up and down the pole till I give you next command. So keep the genie busy, going up and down, and you need to get something done. Genie, get off the pole and do that. And he comes back, up and down on the pole. This is a story illustrating that the mind was our genie. It was supposed to be our slave. The mind was supposed to do what we wanted, the soul wanted. And the soul subjected itself to the mind to such an extent, the mind is telling us all the time what to do. Solution? Let the mind dig a little pole of Simran in our head. When the mind says, what next? Repeat the words. Keep on repeating the words. When you need to do something where you need to put the attention, take it off and say, okay, do this work. After this finished, go back on the pole. Simran. Keep on repeating till I need you again. So the fact that we can hold the mind to perform certain things with our own will, the spiritual will, not mental will, the spiritual will over the mind, then we put the mind in the right place. The mind is supposed to be our servant. So mind is supposed to be our slave. Mind is supposed to carry instructions that we give. Do we do that? We allow the mind to tell us what to do. And later on we regret because the mind doesn't know everything. Mind knows what data we feed it. And afterward we find that the mind doesn't know anything more. So therefore, to reverse this, how does the soul give instruction to the mind without thinking, without using the mind? Intuition, coincidences, circumstances, they tell you what instruction to give. Once you're given instruction based on your gut feeling, based on your intuitive feeling, tell the mind do that. Use the mind to carry out the instruction, not to tell you what to do. If you change this pattern of your life, you'll find you'll always be in control of your mind and control of your life. A good tip. The second way, which is better, is to live in the will of the Master, will of God, will of the Creator. How do we distinguish between our will? Are there two wills, first of all? Is it our will and Master's will or God's will different? Isn't everything created by God's will? Isn't the whole show created by that single will? Then why should we say live in His will if everything is His will? But it's not been designed like that. After being given a human mind, it has been divided, the will has been divided. For experience, for creating karma, for creating the show, the will has been divided into mental will and spiritual will. The two have been separated. So therefore, mental will followed by intention or action creates karma. Spiritual will does not create karma, often it erases karma. It pays off the karma. Big difference in the mental will and the spiritual will. There are many ways to define it. The simplest I have found is, if you have to think in your mind, deliberate in your mind, and then act, it's mental will, because you employed the mind. If it comes without thinking, it's spiritual will, it's intuitive will. Intuition is telling you, which is not mental. Mind always works in time through thinking. Intuition does not need time. What comes as a gut feeling, you follow it, you are not creating a karma. Secondly, events happen to us. Somebody hits us, knocks us down. Is it a new karma or an old karma? Did he think that he should hit us? New karma. He just accidentally hit us, payoff of old karma. Wherever thinking and deliberation is required before acting, new karma. Wherever it is accidental, without thought, payoff of old karma. And if you are acting intuitively, reacting to something without thinking, payoff of old karma, spiritual will acting. And if you are thinking, I am going to take it on him, I am going to have revenge, new karma. Most of the time, when we go by the advice of our mind, we react revengefully. Most of the time, the mind says, give it back to him, give it back to her. She did this. We prolong the karma by creating action, reaction, reaction becomes action, action to reaction. Karma never ends. Most of our life is like that. And that is why the cycle of karma, therefore the cycle of birth and rebirth never ends. But if we were to change and say, I am now going to live on my spiritual will and I am going to go with the flow of what happens. The Creator has already laid out a plan that if you go with the flow, don't make too many deliberate decisions, let circumstances make your decisions, let others make your decisions. You don't think too hard on making decisions. You are paying off karma and creating no new karma. It's a wonderful way to live. If you feel that you have to make some decisions, in jobs you have to do it, in our daily life we have to do it, in planning anything we have to do it, in planning our travel we have to do it, in planning our selection of what we are supposed to do in life, we have to do it. All the time we have to do it. If we have been initiated by a perfect living master, does that help in planning something where we have to think and deliberate. Yes, even then it helps. You can ask Master insight in your thought. Here are choices, which one is good? He says this one, no karma at all. If there is time enough to seek advice from a living master, take advantage of that. No time, take insight. No time even to do that, gut feeling, follow it. No karma, no new karma. But as we know about karma, that karma doesn't end by living one lifetime free of karma. Even if you live your whole life free of karma, you will still have plenty in your reserve karma, in the Sinchit karma, to have another 1,000 lives. You've created so much karma by our intentions and actions of the past. So one life without karma, living in the flow of things and in the will of God, does not mean that you are getting out of the cycle. To that there is a beautiful solution. When your time is right and you get initiated by a perfect living master, the first thing he does at the time of initiation, he totally destroys your Sinchit karma. Makes this life the only life where your karma counts. Very big gift. The biggest, so far as the cycle of karma is concerned, the biggest gift that a master destroys the Sinchit karma on initiation. Some people question this statement. Of course, this is a great master statement, and he can show you it is done if you go to the level of karma. Some people said that Sinchit karma has been said to be sometimes destroyed at other levels, astral level or causal level. Those are very rare exceptions to the rule. And some masters have done this whole cancelling of Sinchit karma over 3 levels of consciousness. But great master followed the tradition of his master. Sinchit karma cancelled at the time of initiation in the physical body at physical level. And that is why it was wonderful. Now, great master also, he was great. Why we call him great, greatest? Because he did things so much with compassion and love, it's unbelievable. And I am one of the witnesses to that love. And I can tell you, this trap of being caught up in a karma, no way we can get out except with the destruction of the Sinchit karma, which a perfect living master, like great master, does it at the right time of initiation. So what happens? That your karma is now restricted to what you create here. If now you create new karma, you can have one more life based on this karma. Or if you create too many, maybe 2 lives. If you are really not very interested in following the path of going with the flow, your mind is very active, every day creating more karma, maybe 3 lives. Because there is nothing to come from the Sinchit karma. Maximum 4 lives. That's what they say. Now, therefore, there are two important things in great meditation. One, to catch hold of that sound. 2, to build up love and devotion for the master. How do we build up love and devotion is a common question people ask me. They say, you talk about love and devotion, but we can't just create it. I say, sure you can. How do you have love and devotion for people in the world? You miss them, think about them, you constantly remember them, you remember the time you had with them, you remember the pictures of what they were doing, what you were doing, if they helped you in any way, if any miracles have happened, how did it happen? Thinking about all these things, remembering them, develops love and devotion. Like any love and devotion, it develops in you. The more experiences you have with a perfect living master, in person, the more you have the means to develop love and devotion. That is why there's the importance of meeting physically, a physical form of a perfect living master as often as we can. There was an American disciple who asked Great Master, how often should one attend satsang? How often is it necessary to attend satsang to be able to make a good progress inside? He said, really speaking, one should attend satsang every day. He says, Master, we can't attend every day. You are not even available. Okay, in that case, once a week would be all right. He says, well, Master, what about people living far away? Let's say a month, once a month. He said, Master, once a month to travel from a long distance from United States to India is very difficult. This is the conversation between an American disciple and Great Master. He said, it's such a long journey to take. He said, okay, for people living far away, but if they think of the Master all the time, once a year would be good. He said, Master, if somebody cannot come even once a year to see a Master, he said, then you say goodbye. He made it such a simple thing. And they said, what is the importance of this? The importance is, if you do not meet regularly and interact with the Master physically, you do not develop love and devotion. Same problem, same point again. You do not have enough material to go over in order to have the love and devotion. Therefore, satsang, or the company of the truth, company of the Master, supposing you cannot have the company of the Master, you can have the company of someone else who loves the Master. Then you can, if two people sit together and they talk about the Master and both remember, it's like satsang.
Dear Master, what is the relationship between constant Simran and mindfulness? Does doing Simran constantly help us to live in the present and enjoy day-to-day life?
Yes, Simran does help in mindfulness. Simran does help in living in the present. Simran does help in reaching a level of understanding and awareness where you know that the current state in which we live, the past cannot be changed. The current state in which we know is a future which we can make from the present. That's how we feel. Therefore, a current state, those who live in the now, those who live in the present, with Simran, they know they have no regrets, no guilt, nothing, because past. But what has happened is enough for them to use the present for the future. So therefore they are really living in the now. Simran definitely helps you to live in the now. All the perfect masters say, don't worry. Even others say, don't worry, besides perfect masters. How can one stop worrying so much? If you stop expecting things, you will stop worrying. Worry is always something that we are projecting in our mind in the future. We are saying, this happened, worse can happen, worried about it. There is a very big difference between worrying and between concerned with something. When you are concerned how to handle a situation, which could be worrisome, but you have to handle it with your strength, handle it, cope with it as best as you can, but not worry. When people worry, they are not worrying about the problem in hand, they are worrying about some possible things that may happen. Once I held a seminar many years ago, maybe 50 years ago, asking people, what do they worry about? Write down your future worries, what you are worried about. And they wrote down on a piece of paper 10 things they are most worried about. Mostly worrying about money, worrying about old age, worrying about death, worrying about children, worrying about what will happen to so and so. All these lists were there. And then I said, next year, leave that copies with me and I'll read them out next year. Next year, read them, none of those worries came true. What they were worried about this may happen, never happened. So supposing out of 100 worries,
one does turn up that what you're worried about, you have been worrying 99 times for nothing. You're over-worrying. You're worrying for something that will never happen. Most of the time, when we worry about something, it never happens. You can check back into your own life. How you worried about this could happen, that will never happen. And what happened, you are not worried about. Because you didn't know it was going to happen. So that is why worry doesn't solve any problem. I once went to a church in Rochester, John's, I think some named after St. John. And then I was entering the church, there was a sign outside. Worry, it said, worry is a prayer for failure. You want to fail? Worry. It's a religious message in a church. Worry does not solve any problem. Worry only creates more problems. So if we become conscious of this, we should be concerned about how to tackle what is in front of us. There was a white-bearded man named, he looked so much like Master. And he was a teacher also. I heard him speak. I was very impressed for two things. One, I liked his beard, white beard. And second, what he taught us about not worrying. He said, we worry about problem. It should not be like that. So he said, when a problem comes into your life, first greet it, welcome problem, then meet it, and then beat it. 3-point formula. Problem should be dealt like this: greet it, meet it, and beat it. And he explained that if you don't solve the problem by your strength and best way of coping with it, it will remain a worry forever. If you deal with it, it's over. Sometimes you may get the results you expect, sometimes you won't. But the results you get will be the results anyway. Therefore, worry has no place. Be strong. Similarly, about fear. We are afraid of things which will never happen. Most of the things we are afraid of, this might happen, don't happen. So there's no sense of fearing so much. But fear and doubt will come to us so long as we identify ourselves with our mind. When we realize we are not the mind and can observe the mind working and separate ourselves, which is part of meditation technique, to separate ourselves from the mind. When you separate yourself from the mind, fear disappears forever. You become fearless. Doubt disappears forever. That is why when you go to see Perfect Living Master, like I would see Baba Sawan Singh, he was fearless all the time. Fearless, certain. In the talks that Perfect Living Master gives, there are no such words as maybe, perhaps. Those are the words in the professor's language when they teach. In intellectual language, there is always a maybe or a perhaps. Not in the language of the Perfect Living Master, because what they are saying for what they are immediately experiencing at that time. As I said in the morning session, when you reach that state of totality, you are automatically knowing everything of every level. Therefore, it's a beautiful experience. You're not living at one reality at a time. You're living in all realities and all illusions. They're all the same. That's what you find out. The realities have been created like that to be real. So when you have that state, fearlessness comes natural. No worry takes place. So that is why just become strong to deal with the problems in hand and don't spend too much time speculating on what might happen, nor do I spend too much time in what has already happened. Imagine most of us are spending so much time in looking back what happened. Oh, I could have done that better. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's a very silly way of living. To be living in the past. Do you know what you will remember the most? Very few good things. You remember mostly negative things of the past. You did something wrong. Okay, you did it. And you felt it was wrong. Do you have to feel that it was wrong all your life? Isn't it enough to feel wrong, say sorry, forgive yourself, forgive others, and move on? No, we carry that guilt throughout. And guilt is a very big detriment, very big obstacle to good meditation. Because when we want to meditate, right here in the present, the old thoughts come. Guilt is a very heavy thought that we carry all the time. So there should be no place for guilt. Guilt can only go away by an affirmation of forgiveness. Oh, I did wrong to my mother, and she now died. I can't even ask for forgiveness. Yes, you can. Forgive her in absentia. She may be dead for you, but she may be able to hear your forgiveness. And so many times we condemn ourselves because we did not forgive, we didn't do the right thing, and we carry this stuff all our life. No, forgive yourself also. Forgiveness is a wonderful remedy for so much of our life's illness. Forgive yourself, forgive all others. All others, forgive them. And forgive yourself. See how light you feel and how good meditation becomes with that. We do not realize that in our head there are two faculties, the mind and the soul. They function very differently. The mind speaks always. The soul listens always. Never forget this. In the head, the soul is the listener always, the mind is the speaker always. So we repeat those words with the mind. If we don't listen, the mind can run away anywhere because we are somewhere sitting and not attending to the words. The mind speaks and runs away. But if we become listeners and listen carefully to the words, the more attentively we listen, the more our concentration of the mind is on listening, the more the mind will be under your control. Therefore, meditation will work. Now, when you begin to listen, you enhance your listening ability compared to speaking ability. Then you begin to listen to the next step in meditation, listen to the sound of your own self. When you listen to the words you are repeating, the sounds that come from the head automatically start. There are people who say, we have been doing Simran for many years, we never hear the sound. And I tell them, start listening to the word you are repeating, sound will come. Listening creates the sound, not speaking. You keep on speaking, keep on thinking, keep on repeating, it doesn't help. Listening helps. Therefore, if you go to the next stage of your meditation, which is listening to the sound, listening to the shabd, listening to bhajan, then listen to the words you repeat to start with. When the other sound comes, then stop repeating those words. If you keep on doing both, you will not go anywhere. Because speaking is being done by the mind, listening by the soul. You are not going toward the soul, toward the self, if you keep on doing both. Therefore, you stop repeating, listen. Listening is the secret of this path. A man heard that there was a guy in India who walked on water. And every day, he was living on this side of the river, and he used to go to the other side of the river, walking on the water, cutting trees and bringing some logs. So this guy flew all the way to see him. And he traveled by plane, by bus, and ultimately a little bit of by foot to reach that place. And he said, do you walk on water? He said, yes. What's the big deal? He said, I have never seen people drown when they walk on water. He said, they drown because they have no faith that they can walk. If you have faith that you can walk on water, you can walk in water. He said, can I walk on water? He said, of course. Come with me tomorrow. If you have faith that you can walk on water, I'll take you along and you will both walk on water. So next day this man was ready. But just before getting into the water, he told his friend, please tie a rope around me. So in case I drown, you pull me out. The moment he stepped, he fell in and they pulled him out. Because he had doubt when he put the rope around him. He didn't have that faith that he can walk on water. So therefore, when the faith is not there, when doubts are in our mind, we have this problem that the doubts come in the way and we don't make any progress.
It's not that you should have blind faith to move on, but you should have basic faith which says, okay, what I can see is what I can see, what I'm feeling I can feel. I'm intuitively being drawn to a man whose unconditional love is so powerful that I can't resist it. In spite of my mind's argument, resist it. Don't go. He's still pulling me. This is a basic thing. I must follow up and see what's the next step. Even if this is the fundamental first step that the unconditional love of a master pulls us, is good enough to begin. And then you go from there, step by step. Your faith builds up based upon your experience. The great master, Hazur Maharaj Baba Sawan Singh, was born on the 27th of July, 1858. Day before yesterday was his birthday. I flew into Philadelphia day before yesterday, remembering it's an important day that the great master came into the physical world on this particular day. Before I left Chicago airport, a man was sitting there looking at my cap. And he said, "This cap is from Kullu, Manali in India." And I said, "Yes." And I was still thinking that what a strange thing to meet a person who could immediately recognize me from my cap. But my surprise was when he said that he worked in the military engineering service, same service the great master worked in, was educated in the same college the great master was educated. What a coincidence that I should meet this right on my way to Philadelphia. I thought it was a great coincidence and reminded me that coincidences are a very important part of our spiritual life. We take them as just chance meetings, chance happenings, by chance opening of a book and seeing something on a certain page that relates to what we are thinking about. It is not that simple. Coincidences mean a lot more than that. Actually, the coincidence means it is a message from God. People ask me, how can we hear God? We don't see Him, we don't hear Him, we don't know where He is. But God has made arrangements that we can hear Him whenever we like. We can hear Him inside our head and we can hear Him outside through coincidence. I know that very few of us go inside. The real secret is to go inside. If we went inside, we would have direct meeting, even a merger, even an identification with the ultimate creator. But if we do not go inside, we only search for things outside. The creator has left several means to communicate with us even outside. And one of the important things is a coincidence. What is a coincidence? It is just something that happens defying the laws of probability. What is not probable happens. And we say, how did this happen now? How did this come about at this particular time? How did these two things happen at the same time? How did it happen that I was thinking of a particular friend and I should meet that friend after 20 years on the same day? How can it happen that I had a problem in my mind? I was driving my car and saw a sign on the road unrelated to my question, but part of the answer was right there. How do these things happen? How do these coincidences operate? The answer is that there is a means for communication with our total self, our creator within, and a means for communicating with our total self outside. The means for communicating inside is called intuition. Intuition, intuitive feelings, intuitive knowledge that comes to us from within without applying reason is a communication with totality. But when you reason out, that's the mind working. The mind is not the same as our own ultimate consciousness. It's an accessory to consciousness. It is added on to consciousness. Our consciousness is our reality. That we can communicate with our consciousness through intuition gives us means to communicate with totality. If you
know what it means to sit in absolute silence and think of nothing but being inside yourself in silence, inside your head, in the center of your head, behind the eyes, thinking of nothing else but being there, you will see that the intuitive process brightens up and you are able to communicate with your own higher self. It's not such a difficult thing. It has become difficult because we rely constantly on the accessory to ourselves, the mind, and we do not rely on ourselves. In fact, we have departed so far away from our own identity that we have begun to feel the mind is ourself. We have begun to say, because I can think, that is me. The thinking machine is me. It's not. The thinking machine cannot function if you don't provide consciousness to it. You don't provide life to it. Life and consciousness is your real self, not the thinking machine. Intuition does not depend upon thinking at all. All thinking, whether the shortest thought or the longest thought, requires time and thinks in space. Intuition comes without time and comes spontaneously, and there is no explanation how it comes. There is no rational explanation how it comes. Very often we get a gut feeling and we don't know where it is coming from. But when we reason and we try to destroy that feeling, we miscommunicate with our own self. So the mind, instead of being a friendly accessory, a friendly machine attached to us, becomes an obstacle to our own self-realization. So that is why it's very necessary to know how to communicate with your own inner self, as well as how to find out if the inner communication is working well by outer confirmation through a process called coincidence. So coincidence is not such a simple thing. I have watched over the last several decades that people who come on the spiritual path, as they progress on the spiritual path and as they make advance and have more and more awareness of their true self, the number of outside coincidences increases. And they begin to see every day some new coincidence takes place. And they say it's miraculous how these things are happening. They're both connected. Inward progress and outward verification through these coincidences, synchronicities, these things happening by chance at the same time, they go together. And that is why it's important to keep in mind that a coincidence is not merely something happening by chance against the law of probability. It's a message.